Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. We're going to be getting started just momentarily. Tina, if you could please mute. Okay, so we'll start up. We're still assembling. We're going to start up in another 2 minutes, and we plan to end our session before 7:45 p.m., including time for plenty of questions. So we'll be starting in just another couple minutes.
This is good. We have a lot of people attending, Sean.
Indeed, we do. It's a very good turnout.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to get some awesome questions too. I'm going to kick us off. My name is Sean Brown. I'm a director on the board of the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 84th Career Series session on practical interview techniques to support your success during a search. We launched our career series about 10 years ago, actually now 11 years ago, in partnership with Keystone Partners, which is Boston's leading executive coaching and career transition firm. We did it to support the professional advancement of MIT Sloan Boston area alumni. We've held over 80 plus career series events featuring a wide range of experts from Keystone, from MIT, from our alumni community and others, all with the aspiration of sharing best practices on this really important topic. Before we begin, I want to share a reminder to everyone that due to the large number of attendees we have on the line, everybody is muted right now. But at any time during the presentation, we encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom middle of your screen. So within the Zoom, I can't describe how it's going to look if you're on mobile, but there is a Q&A panel at the bottom of both. And I'll be reviewing and asking your questions throughout the session. Also would ask you to know that we are recording this session, and we'll also make the recording available to all attendees after this finishes. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dave Denaro. Dave is a vice president at Keystone Associates and the leader of Keystone's Burlington and Nashville locations. He works with executives in career planning and transition, and he's coached hundreds of clients. He also has worked as an in-house recruiter and as an executive search consultant. He holds a bachelor's from the University of Massachusetts, and it is my pleasure to welcome him to the audience. So Dave, I'd love to turn things over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sean. I'm very pleased to be talking to the MIT alum here. I've done it, I think, a time or two before, and it's always been very enjoyable on my end, and I hope that it's been informative on your end. Hopefully we'll make tonight do the same. Topic tonight is one that I really do enjoy. I do a lot of career coaching for Keystone. Probably coach literally hundreds, plural, of folks per year. And interviewing is one of my favorite topics. As Sean, I think, said, I've probably every job I've had through my career, it's touched recruiting in one way, shape, or another. I've been an agency recruiter, I've done corporate recruiting, I've trained managers in recruiting. Now I coach. Now I joke a little bit with some clients. They say, now I'm on the side of good. Some coaching people how to interview effectively. in my mind, since I've been thinking about it for a long time, I try to simplify things. And so in my mind, I think I've got this down to about its core elements. So tonight I'd like to tell you how I think about interviewing. It's really based on 3 pretty simple rules or points that I think anybody can use. And I think that they're simple enough to be used in the moment, so in the interview. So if you can remember these 3 things in the middle of an interview, I think it's going to be a pretty good interview on your part. And so I'd like to explain how I got to these 3 rules, and then explain the rules, and then tell you how to get, how to really use them. So we'll go from kind of the conceptual to the tactical, relatively quickly. And as Sean said, if you have questions, fire them in on the Q&A line. I don't mind taking questions in the middle of the presentation, and I'll also be around afterwards to take questions at the end. Okay, so let's think of the situation that you'd be doing interviewing in. You could be coming right out of school, you could be mid-career, you could be at the end of the career, you could be looking to better yourself, you could have been laid off and you're looking to interview, you could be looking to switch careers. There's a whole variety of reasons. It could be with a different company, it could be with your own company. But regardless of the broad situation, here's the common things that I hear when I tell folks that, part of the career coaching that we do at Keystone is going to be helping you with interviewing. I generally hear from the user that that's great that we'll practice, that's great that we'll give them some tips because they haven't done it in a while, or they don't do it often enough to keep really sharp, or they never got real good training about how to do it. They've sort of been winging it. So I hear that a lot from really most everybody that I get a chance to coach around this. When I say, tell me more about that, they say, yeah, well, my big problem with interviewing is I don't seem to be able to sell myself well. I don't seem to be able to pitch. I don't brag about myself all that much. So that's probably the most common issue that I hear from folks when I say, what is it about interviewing that is concerning to you? And I think the second most often voiced concern I get from folks is, I don't think on my feet quickly enough. I get the question, I understand them, I'm prepped for them, and the best answer I can think of usually pops into my head when I'm on the car drive home. I never think fast enough, in the moment, or at least I think I do. So those 2 things are probably the biggest concerns. And I would tell you, interviewing is a perishable skill. It's like anything else. It's like guitar or math or anything else. The more you practice it, the more you study, what's underneath it, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get. The more infrequently you do it, or the less you keep up with what sort of the current trends are, the more uncomfortable it potentially be for you.
Hey, so, Dave, one quick question that came in here for somebody who's not currently in a search, but is interested in sort of keeping that skill going. As you mentioned, it's good to practice. Are there any other techniques you can recommend for practicing, even if you're not in a job search, like in your day-to-day meetings and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about the day-to-day meetings, but this jumping out of the interview bucket and thinking more broadly about your own, your ability to manage your own career. Networking is an absolutely necessary tool to manage your career, to advance your career. And this could be actually the topic of another discussion, but networking, running a networking meeting well has a lot in common with interviewing. You're covering roughly 2 of the same 3 topics that you'd cover in an interview. And you'll see when I get through the presentation here, if we want, we can circle back on that and see what the commonalities are. But if you've got networking with someone, which I would love you to do to figure out roles in the future for yourself, you're going to get a lot of practice doing this. All right, so the current situation you're welcome, doesn't only cover you, it covers your partner, right? So interviewing takes 2 to interview. Takes two to tango, takes two to interview. So the interviewer is in a somewhat similar boat. Lots of times the person that can hire someone else isn't well trained. I find that borderline amazing. And maybe you'd think that because of what I do, but I really do think interviewing, bringing talent on board is probably, one of the top skills that a leader and a manager should have. And yet there's hardly any training for it, hardly any in-depth training. And people don't keep it sharp. They interview when they need to. So interviewers have probably, as little training and experience as you might, but yet they have the power to interview and to hire. Interviewers are humans, and humans placed in this situation, in the interviewing and the hiring manager situation, have a couple of fairly common characteristics. They don't all do this, but it's pretty common. Interviewers generally like to make quick decisions. So the first few minutes, the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of an interview are really critical because they're making decisions about you. They're like a sponge. They don't have that much information on you yet to absorb, so they can process it, pretty quickly. And most people like to make quick decisions, particularly about other folks. Those decisions tend to be sticky. And what I mean by that is, first impressions count the most, as they say. So they remember that. They're processing more information about you as time goes by, as the interview goes on, and they remember sort of the first few things that you said a lot. And therefore, leads up to that last block there. Sometimes the first impressions you make with someone are very hard to reverse. So in a situation, if you can make really superb first impressions, that's a good thing for you, right, as a candidate, because now you could be a little less than stellar with some questions and you're still going to be all right because they had a very positive, first few impressions on you. They kind of rationalize, well, that's okay. We don't really need that so much, whatever's happening there. But on the flip side, yeah, if you get off to a poor start, it's that impression you made on the interviewer is equally hard to reverse. So you could end strong and still maybe not get to the next round. So that's the current situation. I don't want that to be a barrier. We can control both pieces with the 3 simple rules that we're going to cover tonight. So we can get you to a place where you'll know how to prep for interviews, you'll know what to expect in interviews, and we're also going to show you that with these 3 rules, you can somewhat, I don't want to say control an interview because that seems like you're hijacking the interview away from the interviewer. We don't want to do that. They're the ones with the power to make decisions here. So, but you can influence it with these sort of 3 simple rules that we're going to go over. And that would be the goal for tonight, is to show you the 3 simple rules, how you can employ them to better yourself as a candidate who's interviewing and competing with other candidates. But also, if you're up against one of these interviewers that's not that polished, that's, frankly good, you can actually turn this interview into an advantage because you can get this interviewer to get more relevant information out on the table from you than they have a right to expect based on their own talents as an interviewer. And if they do a poor interview with the person ahead of you and the person behind you, you're the better for it, right? So because you got it out. Okay, so my first point, let's make sure we're on the same wavelength here, and I do this with everybody that I coach. I've been thinking about interviewing for decades. You've been thinking of interviewing now for 5 or 10 minutes. So let's get on the same wavelength here. What is an interview? First point that I want to get everybody to at least understand for the rest of the presentation is the definition of an interview. And I tell folks a lot that if the only point you remember out of the 3 when you're really in an interview is this one, you're probably going to be okay. Okay, so an interview is a conversation to determine a match in 3 areas. Okay, conversation to determine a match in 3 areas. And you can see by the slide here, even though that definition is really short, I'm even highlighting only 3 words in it. Okay, so conversation. Why do I pick conversation? Because this dialogue has to go back and forth. It can't be just them asking you questions and you giving them answers. That's actually the definition of an interrogation. And interrogations are not comfortable. And they also don't give the interviewer all the information that they could possibly get because there's no context. You're not giving anything extra. You're not asking anything more, not any more detail, not any more context from the interviewer. And so they're only getting what you consider to be the, only the facts, ma'am, kind of answer. All right, so conversation is the first thing. Second thing that I want to highlight, second word, is the word match. All right, so
and Dave, I just want to jump in very briefly here. We've gotten a couple of chats in asking about whether or not we're going to share the slides. We will be able to share the slides, correct?
Correct, that's my understanding, yep.
And then I would encourage people to use the Q&A panel rather than the Zoom webinar chat, if that is possible. If you can't use that, then, but the Q&A is a little bit easier to manage. Thank you.
Good. Okay, second word in the definition, match. This one will take care of concern number one that I mentioned just a few minutes earlier. This, and it's for this simple reason. In an interview, you are not selling. That's a myth, okay? Or at least for the current situation, it's a myth. You are not selling. You're matching. All right, and so in case you think I'm splitting hairs here, selling to me means kind of you're telling folks all about you and all the wonderful things you could do without knowing that they need any of it. All right. Selling brings to mind the typical, you walk onto a used car lot and the salesman approaches you and says it's your lucky day because they have 0% financing today and they just got a whole bunch of cars off of lease and you're going to get a great selection, and they have yet to ask you any questions, so they have no idea that you are going to pay cash and that you want a new car, not a used car. Okay. From a practical standpoint, this is a problem because if you're mid-level in your career to very senior, and especially if you make pretty decent money, sort of in the bell curve of all the salaries for this job, you make up you're up at the more, above the midpoint and above, I could probably make a case that the risk to you not making it to the next round of interviewing is not because you're underqualified for a job. It's because you're overqualified for a job, okay? So matching is essential that you grab this context if you're a little bit senior, mid-level in your career on up. That's what I mean by senior, because I see more people not make it to a next round of an interview because the interviewers would think you've done more than this job requires. You've had bigger jobs than this, and of course you have a big salary. That's why, that's why the company paid that much money, because you won't be happy in this job. You'll be bored. So they think you're not a good fit because you're too big for this job. So we're going to attack this with the concept of matching, not selling. You're not you're not saying everything about you from A to Z and then asking, do you need any of that? You're well on your way to be considered overqualified if you do that. You're going to be asking with those questions that I talked about. You see how this builds on each other. You're going to be asking with those questions for needs in the role. What do they need? What do they need from a variety of angles? And then you're going to say, once you find out what they need, you're going to say, that's so funny because I've done that and I quite enjoy it. And that's a match. It's really as simple as that. People at work sometimes laugh at me because I have a tendency to boil things down to 3 steps. This truly is 3 steps. Other things I boil down to 3 steps is because I can't remember a 4th or a 5th step. But this really is just 3 things, 3 rules to remember. So matching is the second. 3 areas. I'm going to make a case tonight to you that all the questions that you'll ever get in an interview are going to have their roots only out of 3 areas. I sometimes call them buckets. So all the questions will come out of one of 3 buckets, or any question you get in an interview will come out of one of 3 buckets. So the definition, it's going to be a conversation to determine a match, to make a match in 3 areas. That is first thing you have to know about interviewing. All right, so if we flip to the next slide, we're going to use conversational questions to do that. I'm going to teach you a technique to ask questions that if it's the only way you ask questions, it'll still probably work. It works pretty much flawlessly all the time. And if you want to get super fancy, I'll give you one more level of questioning as I said, to make this quite conversational. Your questions are going to be around what experience do they need. So you've got knowledge. Anybody can read a book or take a class and they'll get knowledge. When you apply that knowledge once or twice, 2 or 3 times, you gain some skill, or you start to gain some skill. When you've used that skill over time, we call that experience, right? If you've closed the books for a couple of quarters, you only have a couple of quarters of experience. If you've been closing books for 10 years, you've got 10 years of experience, right? You're also going to ask questions, or they're going to ask you questions about your motives, like why do you want this job? And they're going to ask you questions about fit. And I'd like you to ask questions about those same 3 areas: experiences, motive, and fit, just a different angle. And so when you're both asking questions about those same 3 areas, you're clearly going to be able to see where you make a match because you have done it, or perhaps make a match in terms of being motivated to do it, even though you're going to be saying, I haven't done that, but that's exactly what I'm dying to get my hands on. Even that's a match to motivation. And fit, we'll talk about that, but that's managerial fit, culture fit, behavior fit. So if we flip to the next slide, there's my buckets with delivery and motivation and fit, the 3 areas that all the questions you're ever going to get in an interview are going to come from. And here's how we can start to think a little bit more deeply about them. So delivery, as I mentioned, are skill, knowledge, and experience. You're going to see the tip of the iceberg around the match you need to make in the responsibilities section of the job description, right? So they saw some things on your resume, perhaps, that they liked in your experience because they know what the job's all about. Your first round interview, you don't know too much about the job, so the best you can do is the first, I generally call it the top half of the job description. Top half of the job description usually has the most important responsibilities for the job in it. Nobody cares too much about bullet number 17 in the job description, but bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep. So you could prepare to get questions on those bullets. Like, hey, I see in your resume, you've done kind of like what we need in bullet number 1, tell me about it. Or, hey, as you can see on the job description, bullet number 2, we need somebody to do, run a project using Agile. I don't see Agile anywhere in your resume. Is that true? You've never done anything with Agile? So right there, just the bullets on the job description, you can start prepping for interviews. Top half of the job description versus the bullets on your resume. Okay.
Well, and Dave, one of the questions that's come in is, how do you help establish that match when your interviewer opens the interview with a question like, tell me about yourself, or talk about your previous jobs.
Yep.
And, if you don't have all those details, in other words, you only have a short job description, are there any tips and tricks that you've seen used to get the interviewer to open up about what it is that they're looking for around delivery, motivation, and fit, so that you can better determine and hopefully answer the questions in a positive way?
Yep. So I'll give you one example, and then as we go through the slides, I'll be illustrating other examples. But very beginning of the interview, you're right. We can predict how the beginning of the interview start. They generally always start with, why are you looking, or why did you leave your last firm? So we call it your exit statement. And then they're going to say, so tell me a little bit about yourself. So that's the first place you can start digging for needs. An untrained or unskilled or low-skilled interviewer is using that question as an icebreaker. You can actually get mileage out of that question if you give what we call a commercial. So you give a 30-second, 40-second commercial, and then you use a question at the end of your commercial. Before you give them any airtime, before you let them move on, you would say, I know I did that pretty quickly. You would say, so I know I did that pretty quickly, Sean. Is there something you wanted me to elaborate? Is there something that you would like me to spend a little bit more time on? You did a fast overview, and then you asked that question. I can almost guarantee you, if they say, yeah, tell me a little bit more about when you did this and this, that's a need.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to hear this sort of repetitiously from me. You're going to dig your needs out with your questions. That's why questions from you are so important in an interview. The job description is just the tip of the iceberg. It's not everything that has to do with the job. Job description could have been written 3 years ago by the compensation department, but hardly updated to the current job. The As I said, interviewer might not be skilled enough to give you all the context ahead and then do some good behavioral interviewing, in the rest of the interview to see if you've really done that. They might be, I will say, more of a poor questionnaire, poor interviewer, and they'll be asking just specific skill questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you with access? That's a pretty dumb question, right? There's no context. There's no universal scale. My 10 could be your 8, who knows?
Right.
So we're going to talk a little bit later about how to handle that kind of question to turn it to your advantage. You're going to form an answer just like you're going to form an answer for every other question. But I hope
so Dave, there was one other, no, that was great. And there was one other question that came up. It was also related to fit, but more, in an early stage of the conversation, which, often comes up where the recruiter says, okay, what are your salary expectations? They're basically trying to make sure that there is a match, right? Because if there's a massive disconnect between salary expectations and what the role pays, then obviously it's going to be a lot harder to make the fit. How do you, and now there's a couple of things. There's mass state law, which right. I understand you're not supposed to be asking that question, but it's probably not going to build a great relationship with the interviewer if you point out that they just broke the law. So, are there any tips or tricks that you'd recommend for sort of, navigating that without alienating your interviewer?
Yeah. So actually the law has been beneficial to every person in the state, for even more than the reasons that the law was put into place, to enforce or encourage equity. Salary equity, but it's gotten rid in large part of the back and forth around this question. So generally what's happening these days, and we see it at Keystone daily as our clients go and interview. They'll say, what are your salary expectations? Because they can't say, what have you been making? And you should answer in a very broad range. So you should say, gee, I know that Amazon pays very fairly. I'm not that concerned with salary. What are you trying to keep the hiring range for this position in? And these days, because of this sort of reduction in the temperature of this question, they actually tell you, well, we're trying to keep it between 125 and 150, whatever it is. So I would say, compliment the company and ask, what are you trying to keep the hiring range in? And they'll probably tell you. I will tell you that if it's anywhere close, I would coach you as my client. I would say, great, let's keep talking about the job. Somewhere in there is a good number. There's
right.
only one time when you can negotiate, and that's when they push an offer across the table to you. You have no leverage until that time happens. So if you're anywhere near the ballpark, I would say keep going. Negotiations is very effective these days. So you can get an offer to be, in a lot of companies, a decent amount higher than their original salary point that they're trying to hire in.
Thank you. And thank you for pointing out that it's the thing that's illegal is asking what current compensation is, right? It's perfectly fine for them to ask what salary expectations are.
Right. That's what they're left with. That's what they will ask. You can pretty much guarantee it. And so you don't want to negotiate now. You have no leverage. They don't know you. They don't know that they love you yet. You're only going to have leverage when you're the finalist and they push an offer across the table. So you don't really want to get into salary conversations. You'd love to say, great, and move on. All right. So your questions again. So there's a question back. What are you trying to keep the hiring range in? So again, I'm going to point out your questions are vital. Motives versus mission is what motivation is about. So they're going to ask you, why do you want this job? And you're going to hopefully say, what is emotionally pulling you to job? what is really motivational to you? What this company is doing that you find attractive? The fact that you need a job is not an answer they're looking for in terms of motivation. They want to know, you've heard the word engagement. Companies are trying to engage employees. They want to know right off the bat, what about what we do engages you? Movement, motion, emotion, motivation, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about it. And then fit, unless you're going to start your own company, you're going to join a company and there's a certain way that they do things. I'm not going to put any judgment on it. I've seen very successful companies be run by autocrats. I've seen very successful companies run by very collaborative, consensus-driven management teams. So I won't say one is better than the other. You should know what style gets the best work out of you. And that's what you're looking for is a fit. They have behavior, they call it culture. They call it management style. That's the way that's acceptable and actually promoted to behave in that company. And they're looking for a match there as well. When I see folks that leave an organization, or sometimes are asked to leave an organization, the number one reason that divorce happens is because of fit. It's not because of delivery. It's not because of the skills you bring to the table. If I like someone, and I think they're trying hard, they're motivated and they're trying hard, I probably have a training budget that I can spend on them to build up their skill level. If they're skilled and they're just aggravating people to get along with, they don't do it the way we do it. We're very collaborative, they're very directive, or we're very directive and they want to talk and collaborate and get everybody's opinion and it takes forever to get anything done. That's oil and water, and that separates people because there's no training. I mean, I guess there is. I guess they could send you to psychotherapy for 5 years, try to change your personality, but no company's going to do that, right? So when it comes to finals time, you can imagine, and maybe you've even seen the CEO, the high-level manager that you went to see for the final interview says, "What? How about Sean? Sean really wants it. Let's go with Sean. Want, motivation." Didn't say anything about skill. You're all skilled at that point, actually. So they pick the person that seems to fit best and is self-motivated. They always want someone who's self-motivated. They don't want to be in a position to have to try to motivate somebody else. That's called supervision. And most, again, mid upper level jobs, they don't want that. They want a self-motivated person. So I tend to call these buckets, another frame of reference. The delivery bucket is the can-do bucket. There's your skills and your experience. I can do it. And you're going to have to bring examples to the table in your interview of how you can do it or how you have done it, past tense. But you're also going to have to convey to them that you want to do it. That's the motivation bucket. And obviously, can doing something and wanting to do something, two different things. So hopefully that clarifies the difference between those two buckets. And then you're going to, thirdly, you have to convince them that you will do it their way, that you will fit. Okay, so that's kind of the second rule of my 3-point, or my second point of my 3-point sort of guide framework here. You know what an interview is, and then just know what the 3 buckets are and the distinctions between them. All right, now luckily, when people are interviewing you and you're in the interview and it's an hour and you're prepped and maybe you're just slightly nervous, you get to that point which the other concern that people voice to me, which is, I don't think fast enough. Okay, this right here, this 3-bucket model helps in that regard, because if you can detect what bucket their question of the moment is coming from, it takes 2/3 of the possible universe off the table. So you should be a little bit faster about figuring out what kind of story to play, what kind of answer to give. And luckily, there's a not so secret code to these questions. And it's in the first few words of the question. So if the question begins with the word why, it's a motivation question. It's not a skill question. It's not usually a fit question. Think of the questions that are typical in an interview. Why did you leave? Why are you interested in us? Why are you interested in this role? Those are all motives. They want to know your feelings behind this. They want to know that you're engaged. So why is the first word to listen for? It's almost always a motivation question. Second word to listen for is how, and how in people. All right, so if the word how is the first word, you're going to listen for the second word or pretty close to it. If it's how would you handle an employee that is extremely good at what they do, but very quiet, reserved, that doesn't share much? That's a style question. It's if you were interviewing for a management job and you got that question as part of your interview, two things. One, there is a person on the staff that's like that. And second is, they want to make sure that you know that you've had that kind of experience, that you have that kind of fit. Okay. If they say, how would you handle a stakeholder? How would you handle a shareholder? How would you handle a vendor? How would you handle the CEO who wants to do this instead of that? Those are all style, management style, influencing style. Those are all style questions. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, I joked a little bit. I like to keep things very, very simple. You remember these three words in an interview and you're going to be fine. There are too many leads to a delivery question. What would you do in this case? How would you handle this? Tell me about a time when, what would you do? There's too many. And we want to keep this simple. The idea is to keep thinking fast here. So I'm not going to give you all the many beginnings to a delivery type question. We're just going to use process of elimination. That's simple and fast. If the question does not begin with why, and it does not begin with how/people, it's a delivery question. For example, if the question is how, and you're thinking, oh, could be a fit question, and then they say, how would you use our database to sift through a mound of data to find the trends in them? Our database is not a person, it's a thing. So how thing, it's not how people, so it's delivery. Okay.
Dave, we've had a number of questions come up with the third piece, the fit. And I guess, in a word, folks are kind of asking, how much should one contort oneself to fit? What are some of the signals that you might be able to get a read on prior to the interview? What do you recommend there in terms of the cultural fit? And are there any other markers? Is it things like Glassdoor, or, just in terms of understanding the ways they do things to sort of figure out if you are a fit in terms of the way you'd approach it? Sharp elbows versus very collaborative environments, things like that.
Yep, there are a few ways. A lot of them, I would say, put in the back of your mind and then test them when you interview. There is corporate culture, a behavior that's allowed by the management team or promoted or allowed by the manager. But then you get little variances and you get little pockets, based on the manager that's in charge. So you'd want to test that with that particular manager, I would say. And, we all know that in general, when people have a poor experience, they're much more likely to jump online and write a comment about it because they're angry and mad, and that motivates them to do it. Glassdoor's no different. So probably a lot of the comments that you read on Glassdoor are going to be people that have an issue or a problem with that particular company. Again, put it in the back of your mind. Maybe in later interviews, when you've eliminated a lot of competition, you actually might want to bring them up. I've had a couple of candidates that have gotten their offer first and said, well, I have one more question before I definitely accept. And they ask that kind of, I don't know, maybe a little bit sharp question about management style or about, why the management team is composed of who it's composed with, or why the board's composed the way it's composed. So you can ask questions anywhere through the interview, but if you were going to be strategic about it, questions that you think might make the interviewer defensive, I might wait to ask them in the latter stages when you're more well regarded. Don't forget, even if you get an offer, you can always turn it down. A lot of times I coach folks, look, if you're just starting your campaign, the first few offers you get, the first few interviews you get, take them all the way, take them as far as you can go. It's good practice, right? There's nobody saying you have to take an offer if they deliver it to you.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So networking, again, I will promote as a really great way to get more genuine idea of the culture for that group. If you have 200 people that you're a first tier connection with, that means you literally have about 20,000 people in the second tier. We always multiply by 100 to get a ballpark of what the second tier would look like for you. Well, 20,000 people working in just pharma or just business, just, contracts or just audit. I mean, that's a lot of people. You're bound to have a second tier connection that works in that firm. And your first tier connection might be nice enough to get you two on the phone together. And where you would say, I'm interviewing there, or I'm about to interview. Can you give me any intelligence about the culture and how things work and how are business conditions? I'd always want to know that. Is the company doing well, moderately well, going down the tubes? So those are, yeah, you can read the website. Everything for every company is always, hunky-dory when you read a website in terms of its culture and how it does things. But I'd think about people that and that have been there, are there, or have been there as your primary source.
So one other question that's come in, Dave, thank you, is back to the salary piece where you get a range, so it's a hypothetical, you get a range early in the conversation. It's not perfect. It's a little bit below what you're looking for. You move through the process, everything goes great, you're clearly a fit, you have the motivation, they love you, they make you an offer, it is below what you want. Is there any sort of moral quandary associated with then coming back to them and saying, actually, I need more than when you told them it was okay in the beginning? Or do you recommend not saying it's okay in the beginning? Like, how do you sort of massage that if your end goal is really to work there, but you do want them to stretch their range?
Yep. So we're getting more into negotiations now, but the quick thing I think you pointed out, Sean, is when they say you're in the range, you're not accepting an offer. And no, there's no moral quandary. You're not being bound to that. You know so little about this job at this point, right? And they know so little about you. They just want to keep it to, let's say, roughly the midpoint of the hiring range. There's people that make more than the midpoint. And obviously, if you were my client, I'd want you to be one of them. So yeah, that's why we're talking ranges, or that's why we say, yeah, there's got to be something that seems fine. And you're not even talking about numbers. Maybe you're not even talking about ranges. You're just saying, yeah, somewhere in there would work. When you get to the end, you know a lot more about the job. And one of the things you could probably easily say is when they push an offer across, you would say, look, I'm delighted. I know I can do this job. There's delivery. It's exactly what I'm looking for. That's motivation. And boy, I've met so many people on the staff here through the interviewing process. I think I'd be a great fit. I do have a few questions about your offer, though. Questions is the new code for I want to negotiate, by the way. And the first is salary. Salary that I see for this level role in the marketplace seems to be a little low. Would you have any flexibility on that? I just covered a ton of ground right there, but you see where I'm going. You know more about the job now, so you can say this job in the marketplace pays a little bit more. Would you have flexibility, right? Again, maybe a subject for another talk, but we could talk about where to get salary data and where to get numbers so you really know what your market value is. That's kind of critical to making that kind of business case negotiation argument. And that can work for everything: titles, salary, bonus, long-term incentive, vacation. I see this in the marketplace. Would you have any flexibility? Keyword being flexibility. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Be a decent, quick answer for that. Negotiations is its whole topic in its own these days. But you got to
We're going to have you back for one of those, Dave.
Okay, yeah, I see how clever I am. I got myself invited to the yeah, so you got to get through all the interviews before you get an offer. But just to wrap up this by saying one thing, when you say when they do the salary screen, that is not an offer. So you're not under any obligation to hold true to that. Okay, so we got through two rules. One is, what is an interview? Second is, all the questions are going to come from just three areas. So what are those three areas? And we even gave you the code words so that you can think really fast and say, wait, this is a motivation question. But when you give an answer to answer it, when you form an answer to put together an answer for a motivation question, by the way, it has to have emotion in it. It has to have feeling. You have to, look, I looked this up once. There's 558 words in the English language that connote an emotion. I'd pick, and by the way, again, 2/3 of them are negative emotions. I don't know what that says about us as humans, but I would suggest you want to stick with the 1/3 that's positive. So if you use love to anchor one end of the spectrum and hate the other, and you get 556 words in between, I'd pick the third that's on the upper end more. You want to say, now that's exactly what I want to get my hands on. I would love to do that. That's very exciting things. That's the kind of stuff that really charges me up. I mean, when you get a why question, you have to let an emotion word or two out of your lips, has to go through the air, has to go into their ear and into their brain. And that's how the interviewer will know that you are engaged. Okay, it's pretty much the only way. If I could teach you to do it by being animated and by widening your eyes a little bit when you're talking about a topic, and you talk a little bit faster than you normally do and a half an octave higher than you normally do, okay, yeah, that shows in excitement as well. But if you could do that on demand, I tell my clients this all the time, if you can do that on demand, you should go to Hollywood, because they get paid an awful lot of money to pretend to be characters that they're not. Okay, so you know where the questions are coming from, you know the keywords to tell you what bucket. Now the third rule, the third and last rule that you have to know is how to form your answer. I'm not talking about content. Your content is from your own experiences or your own desires. I'm saying how to form the answer, how to deliver an answer in an easy to hear, easy to follow manner so that they get everything. And we use a simple mnemonic. For most folks, PAR will do. This is a very sophisticated audience, so I'm giving you one extra letter. So I'm breaking beyond my 3-step model here, so I'm really pushing my own boundary. 4 letters you have to remember to put the content of an answer together, PARQ. P stands for problem. So if someone says, have you ever handled this before, or how would you handle this before, or tell me what you would do in this case, I would first like you to take 3 seconds and acknowledge the problem. You would acknowledge it as either, yes, I've done it before, that's past, or, now I gotta tell you, that's exactly what I'm trying to get my hands on, that's future. Never ever start with geez, I gotta be honest with you, I've used a lot of project methodologies, but I've never used Agile. Never start the answer with a negative, okay? You're gonna clearly tell them the truth, that you don't know Agile, but follow this format for a story, okay? Always start with, now, I've done that many times before, let me give you an example, or I gotta tell you, this is the thing that really interested me about this job. Always stay positive. That engages the listener. They'll listen to the rest of your story when you do that. If you say, no, I've not done that, the listener, the interviewer shuts off their listening skills, or at least shuts them by half. You could end up saying a halfway decent answer, and you're not going to get credit for it. Okay, so there's about 3 seconds right there. A stands for your actions or your activities. This is the body of the answer. This is the guts of the answer. This is what they're listening for. If this PARQ format took you 2 minutes to deliver, I generally tell folks most answers should be, anywhere from less than a minute to maybe 3. A human can keep up with you. They won't lose you if the answer's, if your answer goes to 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, I can pretty much guarantee you they've lost the thread of your answer, okay? So keep it short. Let's pretend this answer is a 2-minute answer, 120 seconds. I just told you, 3 seconds for problem. Out of 120 seconds, your actions is gonna be 110 seconds, thereabouts. Okay, that's what I mean by this is the guts of the answer. Think of a timeline. Make it easy for the listener. Start at the beginning of your story and walk through the middle and then get to the end. Don't loop around and say, well, I forgot to tell you this and you didn't know this before, but this was never done. And this, because that's going to confuse the heck out of the answer. You want to tell them what you have done. I started to do this. We pulled a team together. I put a budget together. I had my boss fly air cover for me while we squirreled off and did this. We met every Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now I'm a developmental manager, so I had the most junior person on the team run the meetings under my guidance because I wanted them to get exposure to conflict. I wanted them to understand how to keep a meeting on track. And that's how I develop people. So you're going to use the word I an awful lot in this section because they're looking for what you can bring to the table, not what the group did. So people tell me all the time, well, I don't like doing that because I want to show that I'm collaborative and I'm in a team. And after all, there's no I in team. And I say, yeah, but there's two I's in interview. So you have to say I a good amount. You 50% of the time, I did this, we did this, I did this, we did this. If you don't do that and you're with a very sharp interviewer, they're gonna make you tell that whole story again by saying, geez, you know, I like what I heard, Sean. I gotta tell you, could you just take me through it once more though and be a little bit more explicit about what your role was? Okay,
Sure.
that's a big part. And just make sure it's I half the time at least and put it on an easy to follow timeline. The visual I get for this is that little time marker under all the YouTube videos where it just keeps moving across, moving across. There's your 110 seconds like that. Never goes backwards, always goes in one direction. Pretty close to the end, you're going to say the results. The results is actually the end of your timeline. So if you said, and so we piloted it on a Friday, it worked really well. We tweaked it a little bit over Saturday and Sunday, and we went live on Monday. It was seamless. In fact, I think they're still using that system now. There's your result. Impact is generally result. I mean, your result is generally impact, said that backwards. It's the impact of you know, the impact of the outcome. Don't stop there. That's where everybody stops, okay? Without letting a half a second go by, go right to the Q. Q is your question. Remember I said, I'm gonna give you one super easy way to keep this conversational and to make sure you're meeting needs. This is it. I'd like you to ask a question to test the answer you just gave. And the question would be worded something like this. So yeah, we delivered it over the weekend and it went live and it worked good. I think they're still using that. Is that what you're looking to do here? Or would that work here? Or would that fit here? I just gave you 3. You're gonna get in an hour interview about 6 of these types of questions. That's all. That's because there's no time for any more. And I'll show you this in a little bit. So I just gave you 3. Even if you doubled up on those questions, that's absolutely fine. When you ask that question, you're gonna get that's a yes, no question, okay? You're gonna get a, geez, Sean, if you could do that, that would be awesome. That's exactly what we're looking for. So you just hit a home run and you know it, real time, right now. You don't have to wait for a call from the recruiter a week later. You know it right now. If I got that kind of answer and it was a skill question, I would immediately double up on motivation. You'd say, good, you know, because I quite enjoy that kind of work and I think it's awesome to do that. I would love to do that for you. Awesome, love to do it. Emotion words, shows engagement. Okay, what if you got a no? I'll try to tell you that in the moment, even that's a very good answer because I can do something with it now, right? If they say, no, Sean, I got to tell you, you know, normally you would think most companies that would work, but not here. It's just not how we do things. So you struck out. And if you didn't ask that question, they might have moved on to the next question and you would never know. Okay, so they say, no, we wouldn't do it. Okay, that now deserves a clarifying question. Again, see how questions are working for you? You'd say, really, where was I off? Or really, how would you do it then? They're going to give you more detail that maybe they should have given you in the question, the original question, and you can either modify your story or pick a whole new story. Oh, so you don't use automatic test software, really? So I get it. So everybody comes in a weekend and they just hit everything and touch everything until it breaks and then they log it and they fix it. You still do that? Yeah, I did that 2 years ago. And you know, that's not a half bad system, you would say. It's actually great for a junior person. They have a very, rather than putting everything in a black box, they have a very good sense of what the customer's experience with that system would be. That's excellent. I'd love to do that again. And you know, if you ever decided to automate, I can tell you where some of the hurdles are to get it done because I was there. You see how that works? Do you need this? Is this what you're digging for needs with that question? And you want to see if that story hits the target. If it does, great. Double up on motivation as my standard recourse. If it doesn't, ask a clarifying question to get to the real needs.
Dave, another question that's come in is, how do you sort of mentally prepare yourself? And I am going to recommend to the person who asked it that they look at the recording of the session that we did, a week and a half ago on your inner search. But this notion of, you're asked about something, you haven't done it, or this would be a stretch for you. How do you keep from feeling like underqualified? The standard thing is, you're overqualified for this, and that's a way to sort of not be a fit. But what about when you truly are trying to stretch? Do you make up for the lack of the skill with enthusiasm, motivation, and fit? Is that how does it typically work?
Yep. I guess the two big things that people are looking for in the three buckets, fit and motivation. If you generally tell folks I'm a quick learner and I really want to get this under my belt, you'd be amazed how far that goes, particularly when it's a skill, when it's a first bucket question. Because as I said before, I can't train someone to really want something. I can train them in our database. That's the easy thing to do. As long as I know that you want to do it, you'll really apply yourself. And you've got some let's call it aptitude. You've got some, I can learn this thing easily and I want to learn it. They might ask you for, well, have you ever learned this stuff before? And you'd say, geez, yeah, I haven't used Agile, but I've used Waterfall, Microsoft Project, PERT, Scan. I've learned all that stuff very quickly and done very fast. So you'd be amazed how far that answer would get.
So as you're preparing for this interview, knowing if you know in fact that you're underqualified, thinking through your motivation and your fit and how you might have some stories to really beef that up can be helpful. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's be realistic about this. If you weren't at least a 60-70% fit on paper, like resume to job description, or the fact that someone that networked you and got you in there, if you weren't at least a partial fit, you wouldn't even be there. So it would be academic.
You wouldn't be there, right?
So you're bringing something to the table. You want to emphasize that. And then the things that you don't have, you'd love to emphasize the fact that they're skill-based and you're a quick learner and it's something you really want. If this sounds too juniorish, enthusiasm will win the day, let's move it upstream. You're an SVP, you want to be a VP. You're a CFO, you want to be a CFO. You still have to tell the board or the CEO that's doing the interviewing that you want this job. You still have to say, for a senior person, the real root to this answer is in your career plan for yourself. You really have to say, look, I know that in the future I'll be an effective chairman. And to get there, I know I have to be a CEO. I have orchestrated my career to get to this point where I will be a good CEO in my next role, and that's why I'm interviewing with you, and that's why I'm so enthusiastic of this role. So what you're saying is my motivation is that it's a designed plan. I am truly motivated because this is how I have orchestrated. Now, have you been a CEO before? Have you been a general manager? No, you've only been a CFO. So even CFO to CEO, you haven't done everything. You're not 100% qualified. You make up for it with, my track record has been stellar and I really want this.
And as you move up in the organization too, leadership becomes more and more important, right? How you groom and build. So we had two other questions that came in. And one point that I want to make, I know we said we're going to end before 7:45, but we've had so many great questions. We're still rocking and rolling here. The next question is related to group interviews. And as you work with your clients, how do you recommend that they do these techniques carry perfectly over to group interviews? Are there any nuances that you'd share there?
It does perfectly carry over. The only nuance that we give to group interviews is probably the number one is pay attention to who's asking the question. Usually in a panel interview, there's one person that is kind of the lead, and other people either do follow-ups to the question when they want to dig a little deeper, or they each have an area that they're going to ask about. But the thing that we hear back from recruiters, from HR folks all the time is that our candidate or the candidate got the question from one of the people probing and answered it, keeping eye contact and direction to the lead person all the time. It's like the question came from left field and they still keep their eyes on the picture. Always, it seems funny, but always direct your answer to the person that asked the question. Even when we're doing it now on Zoom, you have to invoke the person's name, right?
That was what that was the follow-up question for that one, Dave, was, or do you have any techniques for, if you're in a panel situation, remembering names, making sure that you're using names, and how much do you recommend using names? Is it after every question that you answer? How do you recommend people approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I would do it naturally. And if you're someone that struggles with that, I wouldn't do it every time. I do it sort of every other time or every other question. Zoom actually, it's better than phone interviews, not as good as being there. So it's sort of in the middle. I generally coach clients, look, make lemonade out of lemons. Figure out ways to use it to your advantage. So you don't, nobody in a Zoom meeting can see anything behind my camera. I could have 15 Post-it notes on the periphery of my monitor. I could have big charts on the wall behind my camera. Nobody's going to see that. Okay. So you can use that subtly. So hopefully you got an agenda before the meeting of the names and the titles. You could put little Post-it notes on your periphery. You could even arrange those Post-it notes on your desk right next to the monitor in the spots where the frames are, and then hope that they don't move around as people ask questions. I mean, you can do little tricks like that. I've seen people that give out their own cards in the beginning of interviews, in live panel interviews where everybody's on a conference, and then they subtly put the cards that they receive in the order where people
in the order.
So you can kind of take a quick glance down and look if you forget Dave's name. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Back here just for a second. And then these are great questions. They're all, pretty detailed, pretty in-depth questions. I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure for anybody that had to leave sort of on time, I want to make sure I get through the whole presentation. So those are the 3 rules, right? Honest to God, that's all you need to know. 1, what's the definition of an interview? So you know what the objective is. It's a match. 2, 3 buckets and the codes for what question. 3, how to form your answer, give it back to them in a way that is easy to follow and allows you to test your answer real time. I don't want anybody getting a call a week later saying, hey, we really liked you, everybody liked you, but we're gonna go in a different direction, and you be crestfallen. If you didn't do well in that interview because you didn't match up well, you're at least gonna know by the end of that interview, okay, by using this technique. All right, this technique slots like a cassette into the middle of the flow of an interview. So I just wanted to touch on, for just a minute, what the general flow is. First few minutes, you get your icebreaker, your exit question, and you tell me about yourself question. I talked about them early on, but your icebreaker is the weather, did you find us okay? How's things doing? Never, ever, ever complain about anything. Why would you want to start the meeting putting the first notion in the interviewer's head is that you're kind of complainer? Okay, I don't care if the recruiters sent you to the wrong building and you just got to this interview in the nick of time. Don't say anything about it. Don't complain. Everything's great. We're great. Yes, we're healthy. The weather's fine. All that kind of stuff. It's only a quick icebreaker to kind of get everybody settled down. Then they ask so why are you looking, or why have you left question. We call that an exit statement. That should be pre-planned, ending on an upbeat note. Then you get the TMAY, tell me about yourself question. Again, the interviewer has been trained, literally trained, that this is a softball question just to get you to drop your facade a little bit, drop your nerves a little bit. The answer is all about you. What could possibly go wrong? Get them talking for a minute or so. When you end with a question, when you do it quickly, show your pattern of achievement and end quickly with a question. Again, questions. I know I did that quickly, Sean. Is there something that you wanted me to dig a little deeper in? Is there something that you wanted me to explain a little bit more fully? That's a question. Remember, I said questions are key. You're now training your interviewer that I'm going to be asking questions throughout this. I've never yet got any feedback, and now over the years, it's been thousands and thousands of people that I've coached. I've never heard anybody come back to me and say, you know what, Dave, I tried that technique, and they told me, please don't interrupt me. Please don't ask any questions to the very end. Never heard that. Okay, so there's your first, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes. Don't make it any longer than that. Then you're going to get your, as I said, 5 or 6 core questions where you can do your PARQ answer. And that's going to take you to about the 55-minute mark. That's why it's not going to be, you know, need you to prepare. I don't need you to prepare for 20 questions. You will never have time for 20 questions in a 1-hour interview. I mean, you can timeline this out. Icebreaker, exit, and TMOI is going to take 10 minutes. Okay. Each question, when you do it the way I'm proposing, it's going to be about 8 minutes. They ask you a question, you give an answer, you test it. They tell you yes or no. You give them some. You're having a conversation. It's back and forth. Then they're going to go to the next. They're going to go to the next. 6, 8 to 48. I mean, that's, you don't have that much time before they have to pass you on or until the time's off. The very end, in a very, I almost find comical way, the interviewer will turn to you probably and say, look, we got about 5 minutes left and I've been doing all the yakking. Do you have any questions for me before we break? Okay, that's a trap question. It's a trick question. Think of it. They're usually doing that as they're putting their folder back together again. And they're putting their pen back and they're closing up. Non-verbally, they are telling you explicitly, this interview is over, I've made up my mind. But yet they're asking me one question. Why is that? It's a motivation question in disguise. They've been trained, just like ask an icebreaker, if they remember any training, just ask an icebreaker to put your candidate at ease and they can reveal themselves more. They also remember, ask if they have any questions, because if they don't have any questions, they're not interested in this job. They're not motivated. So if you say, no, I want to be courteous, you only have 2 minutes left. No, I'm fine. I asked a lot of questions. Don't do that. You'll sink yourself, or you'll put a dent in your interview. All right. Yes, I have questions and I understand you only have 2 minutes. Remember I said one bucket was fit? I always coach folks, when that happens, go to the culture bucket, because that's in a very elastic answer. If I have 2 minutes, I give you a 2-minute answer. If I have 4 minutes, I can stretch it to 4 minutes. So I might say one of 3 levels. I think of culture as a funnel. The very small end is the micro culture, you and your boss. So if it's not come up in the interview, you might say, yeah, I have one quick question and then we'll let you go. But how would people describe your management style? You might say, it's about culture. How would people describe your management style? That's a 2-minute answer, and you fulfilled your duty. You asked a question, you'll get a check on that trick question. Okay. If you've already talked about management style, bump up a level to the team dynamics level. Yeah. So the people that would be peers of mine, how would you describe the dynamics? Is it a very collaborative team or is it very independent? So I gave a range, and both words sound nice. So I'm trying not to bias what I am. And then you're going to hear, well, and you just say, great, because that's what I am, right? You're trying to make a match. So you'd say, great, that's what I was hoping to hear. If you've already talked about that, I bump up to the wide end of the funnel. And the biggest question is about corporate culture. So what kind of culture is the CEO trying to drive here anyway? I've read a little bit on your website. I've heard a little bit on different websites. What's the culture like? What's the CEO trying? Every CEO is trying to drive or maintain a culture, if you believe what you read. And so what are you trying to drive here? Is it there, or is it sort of halfway there? Are you just beginning? Is it where you want it? Something like that. So 3 quick questions. You can pick one of them. That'll suffice. And then you'll get to your close. And they will probably give you a very wishy-washy close. Like, great, John, you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm going to do just that. And we have a couple other feats and we'll be back to you. No specifics. I want you to close stronger than that. So I'd like you to say, gee, Sean, I got to tell you, I've quite liked this conversation. I'm intrigued and I'd love it to continue. Love it to continue. I'm engaged. I'm motivated. What would be the next steps for me? See if you can get them to say, well, let me think, we'll get back to you, but it won't be next week because I'm off or I'm traveling or whatever, and it'll be the week after. And they might even say, well, we're definitely having you back in. Great. You don't even have to wait for the call. You know that was a success. You've gotten through one hurdle. You've got the next interview as the next hurdle. In this process, rinse and repeat all the way from screen all the way to finals. The only somewhat minor difference is as you continue in the flow, when you go from manager to colleagues to big manager, there'll be a few less questions in the delivery bucket because the people along the way won't know they won't have the expertise that you do in the subject matter, and there'll just be more and more motivation and fit questions. I've had people take an interview with the CEO at the end, and the CEO says, well, you get 20 minutes of my time. That's pretty unusual. So fire away. I don't have any questions for you. What questions do you have for me? So you better be prepared for that. It's all about, you're not going to ask any benefit questions. You're not going to ask any, do you use Salesforce here? You're talking to a vision person in the organization, so you better ask vision questions. Yeah, where are you trying to take the company in the next 5 years? What do you see as the major threat? What do you see as the major tailwind? Vision questions. C-level people get strategy planning questions. Everybody else can get tactical questions. Okay, so to recap, this is not an interrogation when you do it. This becomes a back and forth conversation. It actually depends on your questions, not necessarily your answers, but your questions to draw out the right context and the right needs. And it's an exercise in matching. You have to meet their needs or you won't get to the next stage. First round to second round to third round to offer, whatever it is. I love this, talking about this framework, because it's not memorizing answers to 45 different questions. As you can tell, I might be a little bit jealous. I've never written one of those books, 500 questions you need to prepare for your next interview, because you're never going to get 500 questions. This little simple framework will handle all the variables that you're going to get from screen to final round. You could never possibly memorize all the contingencies about it. 1, 2, 3. Three points. So I thank you for listening, and I hope that you got something out of it. I was asked to also talk a little bit about the difference between now interviewing in the COVID era and before. It really, that 3 points works. It works on video, it works on virtual, it works on the phone. But if you want a couple of tips about video, here's a few. First of all, first one that I should have put in this list, bandwidth. All right, video interviewing is a lot of bandwidth. So if you've got, which I have clients, their spouse is also working or on, on a laptop. They have a child doing homework on a tablet. If it's a serious interview, you have to ask them to get off a little bit, or you have to pay more for a broader bandwidth, because when your picture gets choppy and the voice starts to fade, that's a bandwidth problem usually. So the first thing I'd building on that, Dave, anyone can go to speedtest.net just to double check before they start a conversation to make sure that they've got, proper bandwidth. Yep. Lighting. You want light behind your camera. You don't want light behind you. You don't want it to one side. It'll light one side of your face, keep the other side. You'll look like a half moon. You want it in front of you. They have actual lights that are called halo lights that would go around your camera. I'm not suggesting that you have to go out and buy one, but you want some pretty diffuse lighting behind the camera facing you. Good microphone. I gotta tell you, most cameras, most laptops that are current vintage have pretty decent stuff. Even your iPhone AirPods with the microphone, the corded kind, and the pods themselves, pretty decent quality. I'm not suggesting anybody has to go and buy $200. If you were going to do podcasting and that kind of stuff, you could do that. Make sure it's at least reasonable microphone quality. And again, there's tests. Every time you get on a Zoom call, you can test that kind of stuff. Background, something that doesn't clash with what you're wearing, something that has maybe a little bit of design behind it, but not too much. Bookcases are great, plants, that kind of thing. Zoom also these days gives you virtual backgrounds that you could either use one of their Golden Gate Bridge or at the seashore ones, or you could upload your own photograph if you want. Biggest thing that I try to coach folks is make sure the camera lens is at eye level. You don't want it too far down. It'll be looking up at you, not that flattering. If it's too high, it'll look down on you. Again, not too flattering. So camera should be eye level, even if you have to stick the monitor, the camera, or whatever on a bunch of books and get it to about eye level. Here's the biggest trick or biggest tip I can give you. Humans crave eye contact, at least in our culture, they do. When you look at the picture on your screen, you are not making eye contact from their perspective because of that angle between the picture that you're looking at and the lens of your camera. So from time to time, you literally have to look at that little dot of a glass lens on your monitor frame or your camera to make contact. You right now probably think I'm making decent eye contact. I am staring right at that glass lens. But you could also probably tell when I was looking at my own slides because they're down there. And it doesn't look like
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that you stare continuously, but make sure you get back up to that glass lens wherever it is, pretty regularly. Again, make lemonade with lemons. Put a little Post-it note there that says lens and a big arrow. Nobody's ever going to see it, and it will remind you well enough. Dress, business casual seems to work great. In general, we tell folks dress how you think the interviewer will dress. I generally say dress half a step higher. If you caught them in the old days when we did it in person, if you caught them and they were having a guest in, or they were having a big exec in, they were having a client in, they might have dressed up a little bit better than business casual. If you had a blazer and a tie for men, you could ditch it if you needed to, but you wouldn't look underdressed if that was the case. Worst case is you can call in, call HR, call the front desk and ask them what the dress code is in the building. And yep, quiet. I think there's a lot of tolerance out there these days for, the dog barking or the doorbell going off. Most microphones and setups these days are pretty directional, meaning they only pick up what's in front of them. So, but if you can, kind of ask the kids not to practice clog dancing at the time you were taking the interview, that would probably be a pretty good idea. So there's my quick tips for video virtual interviewing these
Awesome,
days.
Dave. I'm going to squeeze in one final question that we got in, which was when you're interviewing with someone in HR versus someone who's actually the hiring manager or involved in the team, are there any specific tips and tricks that you would offer there to think about?
No tricks. You can just guess what their focus on the three buckets will be. I mean, most HR people that I know, their role in the process isn't so much the technical expertise, that's the managers, but they want to make sure you fit and they want to make sure you're motivated, right? The reason they ask that salary question in the beginning is it's actually motivation, really. They don't think that if you don't make what you used to make, they don't think you'll stay. They don't think you'll stick. They don't think you'll be engaged. They could be wrong. There's ways to attack that, but that's one of the reasons, motivation. So they're
awesome. And then in terms of
buckets.
And what are, so in terms of the questions you might ask the HR manager as well, I suppose, do you focus on one of those three areas, typically fit, or how do you sort of engage in that conversation with someone who's not within the group that you'll be working with?
You could ask questions like, why is the job open? Okay, that's a setup question for a follow-on. Like, they'll say, well, somebody left or it's a
How long ago?
Yeah. So you'd say, why? If it's a brand new position, why just decide to open it now rather than, why not last year? Why not next year? Why now? That's a needs question. They're going to tell you why now, why they need it now. If it's a replacement, you could say, gee, when people leave or when they move up, most people, sometimes the rest of the people get a little worried. Sally did really good things. We're worried about the new person coming in. Will they be able to maintain? So is there a few things that that are going on that exceptionally well that people might be concerned the new person could do equally well? So you can actually get needs from the HR person like that, general needs. They might not require a PAR question back because they might not know the depth of the answer you're going to give, but I would definitely try, because it'll set you up for next meetings. And I would definitely do, what's the culture like here? How would the manager, how would you describe the manager style? I tell folks all the time, ask the same questions to multiple people and then the
Yeah.
trend that you get. That's what you believe, the trend, not any one person's opinion.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much. Any final remarks you want to share before I close out our session?
I think I'm tipped out. This was
It's your
fun.
final question.
Okay. I like this topic a lot, so hopefully people got a little bit out of it.
Dave, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. On behalf of all of our attendees and the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association, thank you for sharing all your insights with us tonight. Normally, I would physically give you an MIT Sloan insignia gift in appreciation. Unfortunately, tonight we're going to have to mail it to you. Okay. I also want to thank everybody who joined us and asked such great questions. It was really nice to have such great engagement. We have some really cool virtual events coming up over the next couple months. It should be on the slide that you're seeing now. Tomorrow, we have our first MIT Sloan CIO Digital Learning Series session. It's at 10:30 a.m. Then on Tuesday, June 16th, our MIT Alumni Founders Therapy Roundtable, which is at 6:30 p.m. On July 1st, we have our next Women and Wine Wednesdays, which men are also okay to go to, at 6 p.m. And then we have our CFO Summit in November and our next CIO Digital Learning Series on July 15. So details for all of those events, if you'd like to sign up, best way to do it is at mitsloanboston.com. It's also in our monthly or bi-monthly association newsletter. You can register on the website for the newsletter if you'd like. And if you're interested in getting more involved, feel free to email me or any of our other board members, which is also on the website. That's mitsloanboston.com. Finally, we greatly appreciate your feedback and ask that you it's like 10 seconds, if you could complete the brief survey that will appear when you close out your event console. Thanks again for joining us. Dave, thanks again for taking the time with us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on one of our future Career Series events.
I'd love to do that. Thank you, Sean, for having me.
Thanks so much.